some CBD in his pocket, or
Cannabis
some sort of
sales
lifesaver.
today.
So thank you for being here tonight. So we have passed the first recreational cannabis House bill in history. That's pretty huge, being that was a really small group of people who did this. We have an attorney panel here with a couple guests who are not attorneys, but are basically our backbones. They know more about this business than probably anybody. They've been there on the ground floor. And so we're gonna bring our community based with, our legal expertise and our consulting experience here today. We're actually gonna do something different. We're gonna allow you guys to come up and ask questions today, so that's gonna be a little bit later at the end. So, today we have Clifton Black from Colorado Springs. Huge attorney, Colorado Springs Cannabis Council, worked a lot in the last 4 years on many cases and opening a lot of these businesses. That's your specialty, right? Business? Your criminal defense. Okay, so that's always nice to have, especially as we're going to be talking about what you need to do if you get pulled over with the passing of this THC DUI as well. We also have Charles Houghton from Colorado Springs, an attorney who's worked to implement the laws there in that local jurisdiction. We're going to talk a lot about our local jurisdictions and how many people will be banning medical marijuana and how many are banning recreational marijuana that did ban medical marijuana, and how that's going to go. That's going to affect you if you transfer now or later. Then we have Jessica LaRoe from Trilling Hippie Confections, who has a huge fan base, who's been our backbone in the Capitol. We just all appreciate her so much and her advice. We have Craig Small from the Amendment 64 Task Force. He was probably the only person on our side besides a couple other people, so it's very nice to have him here today. We also have Robert Corey Jr., who we all know who he is. Alone has gotten more cannabis back from the our opposing legal opposition. That every attorney put together in the state. So that's huge. And we want to thank Rob for fighting on the forefront for us, because we know that the fight's not over and we wouldn't even be here without him. And then we have, I know Terry, I don't know your last name. Robnet. Terry Robnet. And she is RX Mary Jane. She is one of our biggest patient advocates at the Capitol and lobbyists for the medical marijuana industry. She's pretty much alone with a small group of people, her, Jessica, her husband, Greg Duran. They have basically educated the entire House and Senate on this issue. So that's huge, and we want to thank her for being here today. And then we have the wonderful and infamous Warnets at the very end. So we want to thank them for being here today, and let's get started. Okay. So if I'm a current MMC owner, and I want to switch to recreational, what are my options, deadlines, and costs?
I have some thoughts about that. First of all, House Bill 13-1317 allows you to do both medical and recreational. That's what I recommend. I'm sure that's what most of us up here recommend. If you've got a foothold in this MMC license, you might as well keep it. There are going to be many advantages to remaining medical, assuming there are people that still have these red cards out there in a year or two. Maybe there won't be, maybe there will be. Time will tell, we don't know. But this allows you to do both, so that's one of the few good things about this bill, and that's what we recommend. As far as deadlines, the deadlines are going to work like this. July 1st of this year, the Department of Revenue is going to promulgate regulations. October 1st of this year, you as an MMC or OPC or MIP owner can apply for a recreational license. You can indicate at that time whether you want to keep your medical license simultaneous with the recreational. It has to be in separate locations, separated by who knows what. The Department of Revenue is going to specify how that separation is going to work. Then your license will be issued by January 1st of 2014. If you're not so lucky as to be part of the existing system, which I've argued is going to be incapable of supplying this renewed demand, but I hope they're up for the task. I hope they try hard. I know there's some hardworking people out there who own these MMCs. The next deadline then.
Well, but the retro date's like December 10th, right, from last year. You have to have been part of the industry since then.
Right.
Okay.
That's the interesting part of 1317. You have to, 1317 says, and I do recommend you read this, it is a monstrosity of 73 pages, and most of it's not readable even to lawyers, but it's a good thing to read this if you're in this industry. I mean, this is your investment here. So
It was a good thing to read it several fucking weeks ago, okay?
Yeah. The way this bill is, it says if you applied for a medical license before December 10th of 2012, which is the date that the governor proclaimed 64 to be law, if you applied for one, then you were in this window. So technically, you could have applied and been denied. Does not say you have to be accepted. Just apply before December 10th. This is what happens when the legislature does things at the last minute, which they did. This whole thing was a scramble, and for the most part, they failed. But there are some good things in there. So then your next deadline, if you're not part of this industry, comes in 2014, and those are the opportunities you can in 2014 you can apply. You can disclose your intent.
That means everybody can apply, right?
Right. Well, no, you do have to disclose your intent. You have to say I'm intending to apply for an open license under Amendment 64, and then those won't be granted until July 2014. So there's a long waiting period. So obviously you've got a preference if you're already in the industry, the medical marijuana industry.
Rob, either you or Craig know that, because the language that allows the current business licensees to apply, does that allow you to apply for one for each one you have? Or can you apply for multiple ones for the one you have?
That's a great
question.
It's singular in the past.
Yeah, and the answer
but
is...
I couldn't tell.
As I understand it, existing owners can apply to own new businesses in that October 1st application period. It's just new people that cannot. So a lot of people can come in and just cock block the new people by renting up all the real estate and sitting on it.
How many?
Excuse my language.
Because
If we
it says
have-
license.
It says there shall be a restricted number on how many licenses separate individually you can own, but that hasn't been promulgated yet, friends.
Right. The question is whether, if you're an MMC owner now, does that mean you only can apply for a recreational retail license? The answer is no. It doesn't specify that. So if you're an MIP owner now, then at least under this bill, you should be able to apply for a retail marijuana store and still claim that preference. Again, a lot of these details are going to be worked out by the Department of Revenue.
Well, like with the retails, you look at 1243.4104, that 1A1, where that's where you get that October 1st date for the retail licenses. My concern is it talks about the end of it may apply for a retail marijuana establishment license under this article and not licenses. So I'm just, that's not sure.
Who had a pending application with the state
This is
licensing
how we got
authority
the
prior
good
to
times.
December 10th, 2012. Okay.
There are a couple other
Most
things
people are
too
looking
that
at
Terry and
July.
I would probably want you to be aware of with the dual licensing. There will be some restrictions for people who are 21 and over versus patients who are under 21. And
Jessica, explain what you mean by dual licensing.
well, what the state is referring to a center that's already a medical center who attains a retail license as dually licensed. And so originally there were some proposed solutions that included complete physical separation of all inventory. Now we've moved forward to the better solution of virtual separation of inventory, which will mean you'll have to still have 2 point of sale systems and a set of products that are designated, but kept, you can keep them you can keep products in the same refrigerator per se, but you can't keep the same bud in the jar and pull it out and put two different things. You have to have 2 different jars of the same product. What's grown for medical purposes has to be kept without
You can grow both in the same facility.
but you can't transfer from within one plant.
This will be interesting to see which one will be worth more.
If you choose to be a dual license facility and have and just use a virtual separation as opposed to a hard separation with separate ingress and egress
That means
doors,
door.
then you can only serve those that are over 21. And that will put a lot of strain on our younger patients that are out in the rural and mountain areas if everybody switches over.
Let's talk about that. What are the risks versus benefits of keeping your MMC? Or we now know that we don't have a number, but they will be restricted on the number that we can switch over to. What are going to be benefits? What are going to be things that are going to harm us?
The biggest benefit, I think, is your market share.
Is his mic on? Mic check.
My opinion is the biggest worry is the plans that you have in your inventory for your OPC right now are legally the plans of a patient. And if we transfer those and call that inventory recreational inventory, that's not, I mean, to me, that's just not acceptable. That's not a good, we cannot take our inventory from the backs of sick people. It's not the right thing to do.
But if I was a business owner, what I would do is if I knew I was going to do the dual licensing, I would transfer those plants over and then put 6 new plants right in the ground, so I have 12.
Right.
So it's going to end up.
Can you say that again? And why your reasoning would be for that?
If you're going with a dual licensing, you want to service both recreational users and medical users. The biggest problem has been, well, how do you get that first set of inventory for recreational users up and running? So what the law says is that you can earmark certain medical marijuana plants and say, okay, well, these are now going to be my recreational plants. That way, immediately, you're going to have inventory on the shelves to service your recreational users. I would say if I was a business owner, I would say, great, I would want to transfer as many of those plants over to recreational as possible so I can use the product of those plants to service my recreational users, and I would immediately put more plants in the ground as authorized by the medical marijuana program, so I can have essentially double the amount of plants growing in my cultivation facilities, and somehow try to divvy up the product between the two so that both medical users and recreational users can service them.
The advantage.
How is that not a governmental taking? I mean, you have patients having plants that allegedly they've signed that all of a sudden magically are inventory for the retail world overnight.
So
Well,
basically,
it's
once
up to
those,
the MMC. The MMC owns those plants, so the MMC has the power to transfer them over to 64. To answer the question.
The MMC owns those plants? or
The MMC has
Yes,
custody.
the
They do
MMC
not
owns-
own those
All right,
plants.
let me just, let's answer the question. Let me answer the question. The question is, what is the advantage of recreational? What is the advantage of medical? The advantage of recreational is you're not tied to a patient count. That's a huge advantage of recreational. Any adult 21 or older is your customer. Currently under MMC, obviously, if you own one, you know very well that your plant count is tied to the number of patients who designate you as their center. So you get 6 plants for these patients more if a doctor says so. Under Amendment 64, there is no plant limit. There's no quantity limit whatsoever. You're treated like the alcohol industry for that issue. There's no limit on your corner liquor store, how many fifths of vodka they have on their shelves. There's no limit on Hickenlooper Brewery and how many kegs it produces.
Do we have any idea how much it's going to
One
cost?
of the things you need to be careful of though is that there is language in the legislation that allows them to put a production or plant limit cap on there. And so,
Do you
the way
think
it's
that the
written,
state's
there
gonna-
isn't one in there now, but it's a possibility that it might arise at some point in time in the future. So if you're doing business planning or whatever, you might want to think about that before you build out 400,000 square foot grow and get limited to 10 pounds a month. I mean, you know, you gotta pay attention to what they're doing during rulemaking, and I think as we go along tonight, that's gonna be the battle call, is pay attention to what they're doing in rulemaking, because just like 1284, there's so many things that are not adequately described in the legislation that it can go a lot of different ways as the rulemaking process goes along. And again, the battle cry is going to be pay attention to them and become involved in what they're doing so that they don't steamroll, because they will.
My observation to back up what he just said is that during the rulemaking promulgation of 1284, I was on that panel, as was Rob. I think Rob and I were fighting back against a lot of, that panel was pretty stacked with lobbyists. There was not a lot of independent representation. It was a real challenge to be on that panel. And I begged people to come forward and send emails to Matt Cook when he was the director of that process. And no one wanted to be the one in the whack-a-mole game who stuck their head up. At this point, you have gotten screwed enough. Stick your head up or you're going to get screwed more. That's what, I'm saying it a little less elegantly than my gentleman neighbor to the left here, but I think it's really important to understand that it is a concerted effort, and the powers that want to pay to keep you, that basically want to push all the baby birds out of the nest, will invest a lot of money to get what they want, and you have to fight back with your numbers.
Well, and be aware that, 1243.4202, and then you have to switch like 10 pages to section 4A, and that's where they talk about essentially paying per canopy space. And that's a price that is not set yet. And that will be set by, I think, Med, right, guys? I don't know. But it talks about the state licensing authority shall create a statewide licensure class system for that. And so that's some potential for them to make some money off of y'all. So be aware of that and be ready to complain about it if needed.
It's a serious flaw with vertical integration too, because if you're already maxed on your warehouse space to meet your medical patients' needs, you're going to have a hard time doubling down unless you can afford to event. In the rural areas, there's no more warehouse space. Whatever there was that was available to grow in, the people who have the centers there that are local owner-operators have maxed their space, and the whole vertical integration thing is a mess.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think there would have been a 3-year sunset review.
And some counties, like we just heard Teller County is looking at a ban for recreational. They allow medical, but they are looking at a ban for recreational, which means that anybody that is growing or has a business there that was looking at expanding will not be able to, into recreational, will not be able to do that in Teller County. So as we're watching what's happening in these different counties, that's going to come into play. I, as a patient, find it rather offensive that that now these localities are looking at allowing recreational, but still keeping their ban on medical. So because they don't get all the tax revenue off of medical, I suppose.
That's what happened with Aurora, and what's going to happen in Aurora is that there won't be expansion from ownership of private individuals in Aurora. There will be expansion in Aurora from existing ownership.
Well, let's talk about that, because that opens Aurora up, and now there are properties, because we haven't been able to grow or do retail.
I think that's great, but only existing owners will be able to expand into Aurora. People who live in Aurora, who are community members. I personally feel that these businesses will be more successful if they're owned by people who live in the community than they will be by absentee owners who people feel like they're getting burned by.
I would say the industry is buying the industry.
Yeah,
For sure. Okay, so let's talk about potential investors. How is that going to work? Are we going to be able to take investors, and how are we going to have to treat that situation?
Can't we just run a penny stock scam?
You can.
The rule on investors is the same as it is now, which is if it's a person out of state, it's not an investor, it's a lender. So there's that rule, and then the same rule of you have to be a Colorado resident for 2 years to own one of these, and an investor is an ownership, has a beneficial interest. That's what 1317 says. So the rules are the same as far as investors are concerned. They're owners, they have to be disclosed as owners, and they have to be basically badged as an owner if they're an investor. If they're a lender, and if it's a true loan that is paid back on a set schedule, and it can be heightened repayment of that loan to reflect the increased risk of this business, then that's allowed. So it's the same rules. Both, either
One
one.
of the concerns we've had for investors and other creditors is that you can't enforce your rights in court because they throw the lawsuit out because marijuana is against public policy. It'd be similar if Charles was running a prostitution ring and one of the Johns didn't pay. The court's not going to hear that argument, and same thing, and we're trying to get the money out of Rob, but but it's been the same thing with marijuana. If there's a civil lawsuit over marijuana, like a grower's not being paid or investor's not being paid, courts have thrown that out. But one of the House bills now has a provision that's going to allow those suits to be heard. So I think that's going to help the industry, because people have been so hesitant to lend to this industry. or landlords have been hesitant to rent to them if they're aware that they're not going to be able to enforce that lease. So I think that House bill is going to help the lending out quite a bit.
It's not part of 280.
I forget which one it is. I'm sure
Yeah.
Rob can
Yeah,
tell you more
it's
about
in
it, because he's
283.
fought this.
There's actually three different
dropped
bills
no
that are
longer-
dealing with Amendment 64, so it gets real confusing trying to match them all up, and they don't always.
Yeah, it's in Senate Bill 283. It says it's now the public policy of Colorado to uphold these contracts. It's huge.
It's one of the few good things.
That helps us. There are a lot of good things in these bills. There are.
No, they're not.
And there are some bad things in there.
You have clients. I own a business.
I like
No,
the
there are
testing.
not.
As any attorney will tell you, you know you got a good result in court when everyone walks away unhappy. So if people are unhappy with the bill, I see it as pushing the ball forward. It's better than what we had before. It may not be perfect. I know a lot of people would like a lot more than this, but I know our opponents wanted a lot less than this. So it's helpful.
Yeah.
Let's talk, wanna say
And
something
I
else?
just want to say one thing, and when Governor Hickenlooper actually puts pen to paper and signs all of these, which he will then be conspiring to violate federal law. So he'll be with the rest of us. That'll be nice.
Okay,
And John Suthers will have to defend him.
And he'll also be conspiring to violate federal law when he defends these bills in court, which may happen.
sure, I guess so. Your demand?
I'm not demanding the use of microphone at all, you guys. Somebody fell down over there by the table, hit his head, went into a seizure. The seizure lasts like over 45 minutes. I don't know if he's okay. His name is Ben, I guess. And I'm like really mad right now because I'm here from Minneapolis. I came to see a friend, and he jumped in and was trying to help him, and he was going to give him some oil, some hash oil. And everyone's like, no, don't do that, don't do that. But whatever, I believe in hash oil. I'm sorry, like, try to take your whole conference here, but I believe in marijuana. And I bet if it was medically approved, like, that seizure didn't have to probably last 45 minutes. It caused his brain to, like, injure and him to be, like, not knowing his own name and stuff. So I went to go see him, and I was like, are you okay? What? 10 minutes? The seizure was 10 minutes? I didn't see you on the floor with him. Funny, huh? Okay, yeah, anyways, hash oil works, and we need medical professionals to okay this, and more people need to be able to treat people, and like stuff like that shouldn't happen. Chloe, yeah.
I appreciate it, but
I
we're
think he's
actually in the
okay.
middle of a panel.
I
I
think
think
he's
he's gonna be okay, but I appreciate you coming and,
Right.
okay.
Chloe decided to make an announcement, and she said, I think he's gonna be okay, everybody. Did you check Chloe?
Yeah, I did actually.
I did. He's okay. He's sitting up in a chair.
Chloe was here today to need help.
Okay, so we all know we've come a long, long way in this industry. So where were we,
We could talk about freedom of speech issues.
yeah, we might want to because a lot has changed, right?
Our strong opinions are sometimes our strength in this room. Right?
Okay, so, we were talking about investors and how we can take investments in the industry. Sorry, that's a really weird thing that this guy kind of fell out of here today too. So
He's
that was
fine. He was sitting
kind
in
of
a
a
chair.
situation, but, I think everything's gonna be okay. We'll definitely post and keep everybody updated on that and, you know.
I looked him in the eyes, he followed my hand. Good.
Short answer is investment
You know-
under Amendment 64 is the same as under medical.
Let's talk a little bit about that, Rob, following your hands and like doing roadsides. And I know you wanted to give
Nice
a
segue.
Yes,
small,
let's talk about the DUID.
All right, if anybody in this room ever does a roadside, I will be very disappointed if you come into
You're
our office
voluntary.
seeking legal help. Don't do the roadsides. There is never a good reason to do a roadside. If you have any cannabis in your system, which most of us probably do, just don't do the roadsides. They are voluntary. Police officers tend to be intelligent. They get you to do the roadsides. They make you think they're required, or they make you think that the roadsides will set you free. They won't. Roadsides are evidence. And by the way, I've never seen anyone pass a roadside. Never. In handling hundreds of these cases over the years. Nobody's passed.
Look to your left, maybe.
Well, good for you.
But
God bless you, all
I will
right?
tell you, I made the cop call for backup. I told him I didn't think he was old enough to do a roadside on me, and I thought he was disrespectful, and I asked him to call a senior officer in. And that senior officer told me that he'd never seen somebody pass a roadside with more flying colors.
And the other piece of advice as
I
to
was
this-
so.
There is a DUID bill that passed, and the governor's going to sign that as well. We know it. And it has a 5 nanogram level, which is a made-up number that they picked out of a hat, so it has no justification. So don't do the roadsides. Don't ever admit to using marijuana. The truth will not set you free. If you smoked a joint 2 hours before, don't tell them that. You have a right not to tell the police anything. Don't produce your red card at that point.
Don't tell them you're a patient.
None of that. Just give
Despite
them,
my passing that test, I agree with everything Rob said.
yeah, give them as little evidence as possible. You can still prevail in these cases. It
Do
was
not
hard.
stick your tongue out either.
It was hard to win these cases before this law passed. It's going to be hard after this law passed. We're going to challenge the law, but there are your intelligence at that moment of police encounter can help you a lot. Then the question comes up, do you actually get your blood drawn from you? Do you let the government be the vampire and suck your blood out of your system? That is a tough choice, because if you say no, you will lose your driver's license. That is automatic. It is important to have a driver's license in the state of Colorado. It's a far-flung western state. It's hard to live without driving. We all know that. So you're going to lose your license if you deny this test. If you give them your blood and it shows more than 5 nanograms, then undoubtedly you'll be charged with DUID, and you're going to have to go to court, and you're going to have to prove your innocence. What they did with this bill is they reversed the presumption of innocence. You're presumed guilty. You have to prove that you were not intoxicated. We can do that. It's costly, and it's difficult, and it's a pain, and we are going to try in our firm, we're going to try to have some training for people and try to equip them how to represent themselves if they don't have the financial means to hire counsel, because we charge about $5 grand for these DUIs to handle them. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. And we've won them. We won a 10 nanogram a year or so ago. So they're winnable, but it's difficult. And what you do at that point of police encounter without a lawyer there, that determines how your case plays out. So no roadsides, no admissions about marijuana, no red card, at least until after they take your blood. Then you can produce the red card at that point if you have one. But just don't make any admissions, don't give them any evidence. That's the main.
Now, they have to give blood, or they get a refusal. And in the state of Colorado, if you do not give blood or urine to an officer of the law that is asking you, because your driver's license is a privilege, it's not something they just give you,
And they don't do urine anymore.
then you lose it for a year. So you have to give them blood no matter what. So you're saying don't do a roadside, give blood.
My non-lawyer advice would also be to demand a warrant and not give up any of your bodily products, including not showing or sticking out your tongue if they ask you to do so, because that's part of inside of your body. You should demand a warrant before you would agree to such
But
nonsense.
then you're refusing, and then you lose your driver's license.
You can't take my driver's license away for asking for a warrant.
And the penalties for patients are even
Yes,
higher.
they can. Yes, they can. They will revoke your license for 1 year on the first time.
Driver's license
2 years on the second time.
privilege, not a right.
And if you're a patient,
And if you're a
patient,
patient, you,
What's that?
and you're found guilty, you can be put on probation, and
They have state patrol in Colorado pulling people over actively right now, asking them to stick their tongue out so they can see if there's a green film on your tongue.
and that's just a roadside is what you're saying.
Yes, before they even
You
give you a
don't have to do
roadside.
that.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
thank you.
You're right.
He wants to know, can they take you to jail?
Yes.
That's where they're gonna take your blood.
There's Senate Bill 283 out there, and one of the provisions of Senate Bill 283 is basically an encouragement of training all law enforcement officers to do what's called advanced roadside impairment enforcement. And so all officers are going to be trained, and what I believe is going on, I'm very suspicious of our government, I know probably a lot of people are, but I think is what they're trying to do in Colorado is they're trying to increase the statistics on people driving DUI for THC. And they basically want to use these statistics to show other states, look, everybody in Colorado is driving stoned, don't allow this to happen in your state.
I 100% agree.
We're going to see a lot more enforcement, and as what we're seeing in Colorado Springs is the police are pulling people over, they're getting them to do the roadside tests, and then they're taking them to the police station and they're having them do a whole other battery of tests. They're checking in their mouth. There's this bullshit about you have a green tongue, a green film on your tongue or a brown film on your tongue. You don't have to show them anything in your mouth. You don't have to let them look at your eyes. You don't have to follow
Just
the
a
pad.
green tongue.
Well,
Is it
yes.
enough for them to take you to jail?
I've had 2 state patrols outside of Netherlands all last weekend.
They're going to have more than the green tongue. They're going to have that you got pulled over for something, speeding or weeding. The officer's going to testify that he smelled marijuana. He's going to testify that your eyes were bloodshot, watery. You're going to testify to the green tongue, but you don't have to show your tongue. You don't have to do the roadsides. You have your 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. Your 4th Amendment right against search and seizure. Never consent to a search. If they're going to search anyways, step out of the way and do that. But don't keep any method of consumption in your car. Don't have a pipe, a bomb, a roach, a joint.
Yeah.
If you're moving your marijuana, keep that in your trunk so you don't have access to that. We can use that in court. If I have a client that has a pipe with resin sitting on their console, that's what we call a bad fact. You have your 5th Amendment right to remain silent. Don't tell them you're a patient. Don't tell them where you left. Don't tell them where you're going to. Don't tell them the last time you smoked. The only thing you ever tell them is your name and your address. After that, blame it on us. My attorney told me not to answer any other questions. And then stop fucking talking.
Everything you did under Reagan, go back and do that.
You have your 6th Amendment right to an attorney. As soon as you tell them you want your attorney present, they are supposed to stop questioning you. So name, address, that's it. You don't do any roadsides. You don't volunteer to go to the police station. Rob hit the nail on the head when he said it's a tough question whether to do the blood test or not because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But with this 5 nanogram, it's a permissible inference. And basically that is lessening the burden on the prosecution because they can just tell the jury, look, this person had 5 or more nanograms. You can just presume that they are under the influence. Now we can overcome that, but most people flunk their roadsides. I took a class on roadsides, 10 o'clock in the morning, nothing in my system, and I couldn't do the roadsides. So you will not fail these, you will not pass these roadsides, you're just helping them build a case against you. Name, address, that's it, and then you make the decision whether you're going to provide that blood test or not. If you refuse the blood test, it's a 1-year revocation of your driver's license, no driving whatsoever, no red license, probationary license, work license, nothing like that. But start exercising your rights.
That's what the board is.
If you're old enough to remember what you did when Reagan was president, do all that shit again. Pretty much, that's what we voted for.
So
I
let's
want to let you know too that for patients this is even more important because if you are found guilty and you're put on probation, then the courts can restrict you from using cannabis while you are on probation, which means this is your medicine. It doesn't matter if it's the only medicine that you use like I do. I can throw myself on the mercy of the court and hope that they see things my way, but we've seen evidence from other cases where they have not found it that in our favor. So there's an even greater risk for patients with this DUID, and that's what we try to express, but oh wow.
Well, and what do they say in law school? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again. I can't emphasize enough what Clifton said. What kills us as attorneys is when the cop says they smell weed, and then there's a bowl with burnt residue in the center console, when there's roaches in the ashtray, when it's jammed between the seat, when it's behind the passenger seat, all that fun stuff just really fucks up the case. So, you know, the other joke is what, if you're going to break the law, only break one law at a time. So at the same time, make sure your car is up to par. You know, your taillights work, you have a registration, you have 2 license plates, not just one on the back. You know, just pay attention to that stuff because the consequences are a hell of a lot more serious now.
Before we get into questions from the audience, I want to go over taxes a little bit.
Can I dovetail on that from what we were just talking about? If you vote yes on this tax, you are voting to fund the drug recognition experts that are going to come and fuck with you. So vote no on this tax. for a myriad of other reasons, also vote no on this tax because it's an ass fucking. But vote no on it for simply the reason that you don't want to go to jail. And if you're a patient, don't vote yes on the tax so other people can pay taxes because you have just as much right of getting caught by that drug recognition expert.
And when you say it's bad, let's give like specifics too. I mean, what's so bad about it?
Okay, well,
It's being demanded. So, right? I mean, they've tried to demand it many
well,
times.
you
but-
have 25% tax. They call it 25%. It's not 25%. You have the 3% state tax and you have the 8% local tax in most communities. So you're really paying 36% in tax. So on $200 worth of weed, you just paid $70 in taxes. I have an extremely hard time as somebody who came from the black market into this industry and still knows a lot of people who did not come forward to join the legal rush, who I have the utmost respect for and think are very bright at this point. You know, there is no cartels coming here. It's the same black market that's been serving the same petty customer that they've been serving for 20 years, whether that person's a professional or that person's a hippie. They have the same dealer that they had for the past 10 years for the greatest likelihood. And those people are happy. When our prices go up, they get to raise their prices a little bit. So if our prices go up $70 on $200, their prices will go up $50 on $2. And they, you know, that's good for the community of Nederland where I live because everybody's got money to go to the grocery store. But ultimately, it is not good for the industry. And I think that most of these bills are a huge reward to the black market and a slap in the face to the industry. And that is the honest truth. From edibles to
Well, I mean, we're
flowers.
also taking a lot of money here from the drug task force. So, I mean, when you look at it from an economics point of view, you know, I think that's kind of where they're looking at it from. But what's the price of cannabis going to be? Where do you guys see that going as far as like recreational to medical? You're talking about two of the same jars sitting on the same shelf. Could they possibly be worth, I mean, huge difference in pricing? Because one's recreational, one's cannabis?
I mean, that's a good argument to stay medical, is you're not gonna have to pay this extra sales tax or this
That's
excise
a
tax.
huge advantage.
You'll have made out $35 advantage on your first $200 purchase.
So tax-wise, it's better to stay medical.
And you'll more than make up the cost of getting your red card.
Yep, if you buy, well, what we figured is, let's say that the wholesale price of an ounce is $100 and you pay 15% excise tax on that, that's $115. Let's say that the retail, they decide to just take that and double it, that's $230 now for your ounce. And then once you figure out the tax on top of that, I think we figured it out to be about another, it totals out to be another $38. So you'd be saving all of that money by staying medical. But if you're gonna do that, make sure you tell your dispensary you're gonna stay medical, because they all think we're switching.
They do. I have of my clients that I work with, about 20% are definitely not planning to make the recreational switch. They don't see any advantage to doing so. That's more.
How many people in here are own a medical marijuana business?
Oh.
How many of you are planning on switching to recreational? I've been getting the
Straight
same
switches.
response.
Dual license, you're gonna do both.
Everyone I know hopes to do both, but they don't know all those minutiae of doing it.
Well, I mean, it's a huge
Yeah.
risk, and it's going to cost a lot of money to make a different entrance. I mean, it's like investing in another business, correct?
Yes, but I think there's a couple issues of also being medical. For instance, part of this bill proposed that now, okay, so previously, before it was legal, when you had up to 8 ounces of marijuana, that was a misdemeanor. Now at the 29th gram, you're a felon. So I keep my car just to keep my 2 ounces. I mean, at your house, you can have 29 grams, but you walk out the door with what you weighed up as a nice dry ounce and it rains and a bunch of moisture gets in there, now you're a felon.
So what
I
does
mean, I
that
know
mean? Does
that's
that mean you
pedantic.
can grow both? You can have your medical and your recreational plants?
That was,
So can a person actually smoke because they need it for medicine, and then that same person's allowed to get high as well?
oh no, if you're sick, you're not allowed to have any fun.
That's what I thought. I mean, really though? is
Right
that
now, there's
okay?
no prohibition on that, so that's a field argument.
That will be something you think will be implemented in the, well, it's no longer
It
going to
was
be the medical
definitely
marijuana
discussed by
enforcement
the task
commission.
force that they did not want to allow that. Like the Leo part of the task force did not want to allow that, but it never got enshrined. So it's like a thing that they don't want to allow it, but I have a hard time believing that the best black market enforcement plan that the law enforcement of the state came up with was home inspections of personal grows. It's pretty sad.
Well, does anybody know, because we have the excise tax, right? But with vertical integration, you have a grow that you probably own selling to your own MMC. But we now have this weird kind of committee that's going to guesstimate, I guess, the price The average.
How does that work for trim?
And if you're out of state, you can only buy so much.
I hope like hell I'm not paying the same excise checks on
You
trim.
don't want to
that
give you
I get.
recreational CME fund, you know, that doesn't make really too much sense.
Well, it'd just be odd, because then there's all this language about we're not price fixing. But it'll be interesting to see. Are there other industries like that, you guys know?
Alcohol.
Alcohol does that?
They-
But I thought without being dual licensed, you can't be the,
Yeah, their excise tax, I mean, sadly, they had to make that catch-all because they knew the scoundrels that were pushing vertical integration on them were criminals, and they didn't think they could trust them. That's my opinion.
well,
The real reason for the quarter ounce is that people from other states are lightweights.
But that doesn't make any sense, because you go in to get your quarter ounce, it's limited per transaction. So all you do is you get in line, you do your quarter ounce transaction, then you just get in the back of the line, you do another transaction, you get in the back of the line, you just keep
So
doing
if I came here from out of state, how much would I buy? Like, can I buy an eighth today and a quarter ounce today and a quarter ounce tomorrow? I mean,
It's a quarter ounce per transaction.
so I can go to 50 different places if I have quarter ounce.
You can make another transaction 5 minutes later, all you have to do is walk outside, come back in to show your ID again.
I don't even walk outside. You buy your stick of gum, and then you go get another stick of gum, and you buy that stick of
So
gum.
can you walk into a medical marijuana center, buy your 2 ounces or whatever, and then go next to their recreational and buy your other?
Well, then you're gonna be over the 1 ounce free possession.
Yeah, but you're a medical and you like to smoke
If your medical
recreational.
card says that you can have more, sure.
Rob will find out in court in several months from now.
I mean, when you buy your marijuana, it doesn't say stamp medical or recreational. It's as long as under one theory of the law or the other theory of the law, as long as you're within the law, it's not going to be a problem.
But I doubt if you could add your medical and your recreational. I don't think you can carry 3 ounces and get away with it.
And this is important to
You can.
know because some
You
people will
absolutely
try
can.
that. I think that that's
Yeah,
something they
Amendment
might not
64,
understand.
Amendment 64 expressly says that it doesn't amend Amendment 20, and Amendment 20 allows you to have whatever amount is medically necessary. Amendment 64 legalizes recreation. Patients still need to recreate. They're human beings. We live in this world, so we have our medical marijuana, and then we have our recreational marijuana. Even the cops believe that it's cumulative.
They do.
Even the cops out there are saying, this is your medical plus your recreation. And so-
Rob, follow-up question to that, so you can have 6 plants medical and 6 plants recreational.
Absolutely.
we have Denver cops in writing saying that. Yeah.
That's why the 12C in it.
Right now, there's no prohibition on it, but just like House Bill 1284 and following rules and regulations, we're going to see a lot more rules and regulations coming into this. I think you have a great argument. There's no prohibition for being recreational and medical at the same time, and having your recreational plants and your medical plants, but you could get I've seen less prosecutions in El Paso County than 2 years ago, a year ago. But if you got some prosecutor or some law enforcement officer that wanted to go after that, they could do it. And then you're, of course, in the position of defending yourself, which is not cheap, and there's always a risk. But I agree with Rob that there's no prohibition on that right now.
Okay, we're going to take some questions from the audience. Before we do that, I want to talk about the next Amendment 64, not Amendment 64, but the House Bill, the task force. The Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division will now just become the Marijuana Enforcement Division, and they're going to regulate both agencies. So that's a little different because, I mean, in tobacco, in alcohol, what is it, $1,500 a year to renew a liquor license in the state. So it's different, you know, different prices, and now we have this whole new system for marijuana, which we said that we all voted we wanted to, you know, tax and regulate like alcohol. So what do you think the Marijuana Enforcement Division is going to do, or what we're going to face in that implementation?
Spin!
I think they're going to start the same way. They're going to start right out of the gates. They're going to be very aggressive. They're going to be looking at all of the applications, and then they're going to realize as time goes by that this is a bigger job than they can actually do. As we saw with the OBD, there's been a serious lack of enforcement, which, on one hand, it's benefited people because there haven't been as many shutdowns in businesses. On the other hand, plenty of black market businesses are able to compete with white market businesses, and it's very difficult with the white market businesses having to be able to increase their cost to satisfy all these regulations when there's no one enforcing the regulations against themselves or anybody else. But if they get caught, they lose their license, they go to jail.
I do think the MMED learned a lot of lessons. I mean, I'm not here to defend them, believe me, but, you know, they realized they came down too hard on us at the beginning and argued for a moratorium, which the legislature agreed with in House Bill 1043, and that moratorium starved the MMED of anything new. They starved themselves, and they deserved it, by the way, and then they had to let go all these employees. They were getting no new revenue because they were crushing us, and we're their source of revenue. And I do think there are some good people in MMED. I mean, I know you probably don't agree with me, but you know, they probably learned their lesson, and I think they do understand. They've grown. When they started, they had no idea what marijuana was. Literally, these people that were regulating us had no clue about what they were regulating. They've learned. And
Respectfully, that's spoken by somebody who bills his hours like an attorney.
I don't bill by the hour, I do flat rates, but anyway.
I'm just teasing you out, but I mean...
I do think the MMED, which will soon be the MED, understands that this is a vastly larger market, and I've preached this to everyone who will listen. Right now, our market is 108,000 red card holders, right? Give or take 1,000 or two. And the new market is 4 million adults who are 21 plus, who are Colorado residents, plus any tourist who shows up in our state. I mean, that is a vastly larger market, 10 times as large. And, you know, if the MED is not up for the task, there will be many others in, and I don't even call it the black market anymore, it's the gray market. Marijuana is legal. These are just unregulated individuals working in the gray market. They will meet the demand. They'll be happy to do it, and they're legal. They're following the law. They're just not taxed and they're not regulated. And you know, the MED will figure that out. They'll figure it out quickly, or they will cease to exist, in my opinion.
I want to pose a question.
And the other thing is too is that most of you have seen the report that came out about the MMED's performance to date. You can bet that there's a lot of people that are a little ouchy over that. So I guess if I'm looking into my crystal ball, first of all, they know a lot more about the industry than they did when they first started. And secondly, I don't know that they're going to be as forgiving this time around, because the battle cry is going to be, you should know better, you've been down this road before. And the other thing is they've got a lot of people watching, not only their superiors about how they do things, but also, you know, there's political pressure, and you know, we're one of the few states, two, that have done this, and the world is watching, and they are aware of that. So I think that the relationships are going to remain cordial, but I think there's going to be a lot less slack given in some circumstances. And as new people come into the industry, I think you're going to see, you know, that because of the size of the market, because of the size of the job, and because of the fact that if you get caught doing something wrong, they can fine you, which for them is revenue. I think it's coming. They haven't done it yet because they don't have the manpower, but I think it's coming.
Well, it would be nice if they weeded out the bad apples from within the industry before they allowed the application process to open in October. That would be epic. But additionally, I see a fear with the taxes and the regulatory agency, because essentially we will all have to apply in October if we want to become dual licensed or make the transition to becoming just recreationally licensed. And if we make that application in October and the voters vote in November not to pass that excise tax, and really the sales tax is the funding for them. The excise tax isn't as relevant to the med, but the sales tax will be. If they don't get that 10% tax, they're not really funded, and they cannot, by 64, they are bound and unable to increase the licensing fees. So I see a conundrum where they may decide to only approve very few or no licenses if they don't get the tax money. However, I still endorse voting no on that tax wholeheartedly.
Well, and for me, it was incredibly disappointing to see them pass the cost of the regulation onto the consumer, and with so little discussion about fixing med. And I mean, are they going to have twice as many cars as employees and $2,500 chairs and continue to rent office space above and beyond the market rate? I mean, it's just nutty that throughout all of this and this discussion of a higher tax rate than anything ever, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about how they're spending it.
Because we all trust them. They've learned their lesson.
Yeah. So, let's talk felons. In 1284, we had, if you got caught with marijuana 10 years ago, it was under a certain amount. Today, what you can charge would determine whether or not you would get in the business, correct? Is kind of how we repealed that. So what is going to happen with felons now?
We've made some improvements. Actually, before it was that like rapists and robbers could enter the industry after they
Could basically kill somebody.
But pot felons couldn't?
Yeah.
Now pot felons are only restricted for 5 years longer than rapists and robbers. We're helping you out, bros.
So
And quite frankly, I trust the grower I knew 10 years a hell of a lot more than I want my 22-year-old bud tender left alone with a rapist.
Yeah, the
So
rule
is that
in
10 years or
13,
5 years?
It's 5 years for everyone else, 10 years for pot.
And if it wasn't a felony, if it's not a felony now, and you were previously convicted of a felony, but it's not a felony now, and marijuana is legal, then it doesn't bar you from the industry. So the argument we're making for people is none of this marijuana should be a felony at all. It's supposed to be a regulatory offense. That's Article 18, Section 16, subsection 5. It says this should be a civil penalty, any marijuana offense. So therefore, there is no bar to
I'll be calling on you in the
felons.
next session, Rob, because that's going to be, the criminal penalties are going to be the big topic for next session, I believe.
Yeah.
I agree.
And increasing the penalties for anyone who is acting outside of Amendment 64, Amendment 20. I see
You
that
can
coming
bet
down the pike is that they are
2014.
going to try and increase the penalties for those.
I
I know
guarantee-
also they are going after home growing. They really don't like that. And one of the ways they tried to do it this session, but we were able to stop it, was through a measure called the Drug Endangered Child definition. We were able to stop it this time, but we know it's coming back. And I did talk to the lobbyist for the police union, and she told me their biggest concern is the home grows. So watch out for that coming up.
But that can't be stopped because the
And I have a-
Constitution makes growing in the home a constitutional right.
I have a feeling,
Pure and
Rob,
simple.
that once the Leos
Yeah,
realize,
as long as they get, yeah, exactly. They'll just take your kids out of your home and let you continue to grow there all you want.
So Rob, let's talk about consumption a little bit. Let's address that. People, they're allowed to come to Colorado, they can buy it. What if they're smoking it in their hotel room or the street? Then are they in trouble? Do they get arrested? I've heard some really crazy stories lately. The cops they want to take your stuff, but they can't. It's kind of a weird situation.
Well, it's
What else
actually,
do they do?
this is one of the few aspects where marijuana is like alcohol. It really is. I mean, you can't take this beer and walk down 16th Street Mall. If you do, they'll take your beer and they'll give you a petty offense of public consumption of alcohol. They won't take you to jail. And now it's the same thing with marijuana. Don't walk down 16th Street Mall smoking a joint. Well, if you do, and if they see you, they'll take your joint and they'll give you a ticket. And then yeah, it's a petty offense. So that actually is pretty well aligned with alcohol, and that is progress. And if you're just carrying marijuana, simple possession, you can carry your unopened six-pack down 16th Street Mall. You can carry your unconsumed marijuana. They did pass some packaging stuff with vehicles, and again, what the other lawyers have said up here about vehicles remains true. Just don't have it within arm's reach in your vehicle. Just put it in the trunk. That's good advice on many grounds, the DUI thing, but also there is this open container issue, and they tried to line up open container of marijuana with open container of alcohol. Obviously, the analogy is pretty weak, but they don't want you to have a, quote, open container of marijuana in your car in arm's reach.
I have a
consumable.
question on
So
that.
just keep it in your trunk. That's
All right,
pretty
legal
much the bottom
question.
line.
If you drive a two-seater pickup truck with an open cab, with an open bed, where do you put your weed? Because you know where it is in the cab, but some random kid could steal it out of the pickup bed. When you stop at a stoplight, kids are going to descend on you while their parents aren't looking.
Wherever they find marijuana, it comes into court. So you want to have it as far away from you as possible.
But it's not secured in the back of an open pickup bed.
I'm not saying put it back in the open pickup.
But where would you put it then?
You put
In
it
the
as far away
cab,
from you as
but
you can.
sealed
You
up.
can. It's a fact that comes into court. You got to put it somewhere.
Get a safety deposit box, you put it in your car, and keep the key in the bed of the truck.
Just keep it sealed. I think that would be sufficient. Pickups are very common in Colorado. cops own them. If you keep it
So
sealed.
if I'm driving to my friends with a joint in my purse,
Just keep it sealed. Just
You're like
keep
having
it
an open bottle of
packaged.
Jack in the eyes of
it's like an open bottle.
And it's only a civil, only a fine.
Right.
It's also probable cause to draw your blood.
Yeah, be careful with the
Which is
DOID.
the
But
bigger
also,
issue.
be aware of the weird little municipal laws, like we're running in a lot of situations in Aurora where they have a 150 square foot garden limit as well as an unusual smell municipal ordinance. And so they're running into situations where they appear incredibly depressed that they can't bust the folks and they're hitting them for these garden violations. And if you're in a townhome, that gets as little as 100 square feet. And former Judge Ruddick is very insistent, because he's now the city attorney out there. And Judge Ruddick is very insistent on max fining that at $1,000 per violation per day. So, yeah, beware just that weird little crap like that, because that still exists, even if you're 64.
Well, in like Denver, you're only allowed to have 12 plants. So, yeah, it doesn't matter whether they're medical plants or recreational plants. 12 is your limit.
Unless you have a medical reason to have more. Constitution trumps local ordinance.
But you still have to fight that. So that's still, okay, we have a question here?
That's actually one of the questions. Like, how is this going to affect the medical growers and elevated plant counts and things of that nature?
Good question. And the answer is that it doesn't. Amendment 64 does nothing to add to or take away from medical. Medical marijuana is still a constitutional right. Amendment 20, Article 18, Section 14. It still applies, and there's still this body of law, large body of law in House Bill 1284 and House Bill 1043, and it's still a regulated industry. Now, time will tell whether it's a viable industry. Time will tell whether there is 100,000 people with red cards. It may well be that there are 2,000 people with red cards, and then, the economy will adjust in that way. And we don't know, actually.
I would advise-
My understanding is there's been an increase in people going to doctors since the passage of 64, which makes sense if you think about it, because people want to buy their retail marijuana, which is now legal,
And selling plants.
well, that too, and so actually the doctors I know are jam-packed. They're booked up
Can
solid.
I just also make a recommendation that you keep all your paperwork in really good order, and don't find it that shocking if you're growing 30 plants in a residence that the cops are going to want to ask more questions than they were before, because their whole solution is checking out home grows. And that, like Terry said, they are really butthurt about it, and they're really up in arms about it, and they think that that's where the black market is coming from, and that's where they want to go looking for it.
Well, because a lot of the discussion, I mean, it was pretty interesting going through the task force meetings and all of that, and hearing some of the comments. And, it was really distressing to law enforcement about these home grows. And there was talk about, being able to accumulate, everything that you grow and how long can you keep it. And, they wanted to put limits to that. And fortunately that was shot down, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't rear its ugly head again somewhere down the line.
Which is
Correct me
fascinating.
if I'm mistaken, but isn't that the difference between the Colorado legalization as opposed to Washington's, is they don't allow a home grow?
That's a huge
Washington does not allow home grown.
Yeah.
It's not
And they
legalization,
have
it's
a per
regulation.
se, 5 nanogram per se limit.
That brings up an interesting philosophical point. As a home grower, you are some of the freest Americans out there. I mean, you live freedom. You're producing your own marijuana, and I mean that is offensive to people whose job it is to restrict your freedom. I mean that you're basically giving a middle finger salute to the man when you grow your marijuana. And
You should grow just to grow, just for that reason alone.
But luckily, Amendment 64, and the voters are smart in Colorado. We've got to give them credit. It is now a constitutional right to grow marijuana in your home for your own recreational purposes, and you don't have to have a debilitating medical condition. That will not be repealed. I mean, this idea to repeal Amendment 64 if the voters don't pass taxes, I mean, that was doomed to fail. It did fail, but it wouldn't have passed legal muster. Would they have said, if you don't pass a tax, we're going to repeal your First Amendment right to freedom of speech? That would never fly. The law would not allow that to happen. Courts get it wrong. They would get that right. They would get that right. So as a home grower, I mean, it is your constitutional right. Now, should you give your 15-year-old access to your home grow? Of course not. Common sense matters. Don't lose your common sense. Of course your grow is locked up if you have a 15-year-old in your home. That's just common sense. I don't think I have to preach that to this group. But it is your constitutional right to grow marijuana if you're 21 or older, period. And you don't have to have a doctor's approval for it anymore. All you have to be is 21 and within the four corners of the borders of our state, period.
Well, did they state the
Is that
beautiful
true
statute?
outside as well, or only indoors?
It can't be publicly viewed, but think about that. That's a common sense thing too. Do you really want your marijuana just hanging out there in public view if you've got huge football-sized buds on your plants? Of course you don't want that publicly viewed anyway.
Common sense.
Rob,
So the Constitution is your friend.
But Rob, did they change a statute that says it's child abuse
No.
to have a child within the premises of marijuana without any show of harm?
I'm
No,
not
they
here-
didn't.
I'm not
So
here
they
to
can
defend
still
the
charge
legislature.
you with child abuse because they didn't change that.
My neighbors have children, but they would have to hop a 6-foot fence to get into my backyard. Does that mean that I am still liable?
Yes,
here's
great
what-
news. Now, your legal right to legally possess a non-lethal substance is superseded by the right of the parents of the little shit that steals from you. Hooray!
Well, and almost as
True.
stupid, if you
Well, when I
invite
was
them
a
over
child-
for dinner,
when I
they
was-
can be charged with child abuse if they bring their kids.
When I was a child, I could hop a 6-foot fence.
I could still hop a 6-foot fence.
We had a question here.
Not touch that one.
I wear gym shoes all the time. I'll be over that fence in no time.
All right, it's actually not a question. I want to clear something up that was incorrectly stated on the panel. I'm one of the lobbyists that worked on Amendment 64. And if you actually pay, I know there was an issue when it came to felonies and misdemeanors with pot possession. You can have 6 ounces of pot as a misdemeanor, 1 to 2 ounces is a petty offense. This was all corrected in the CCJJ bill, Senate Bill 250. The reason they took it out of Senate Bill 283 is because it was corrected in Senate Bill 250. There's also some suitability requirements that was slightly adjusted in Senate Bill 125, I believe. If there was an enterprising attorney out there who could probably take advantage of that, I'm sure it's Rob Corey. Anyways, it has to do with felony suitability requirements for business entries. It's very broad, and you're aware of it. But anyways, I just wanted to correct that because I feel that's important for people to know.
But the felony cutoff is now 12 ounces of marijuana. So 12 or under is a misdemeanor currently, and that's what the reference is. So you're right.
We have any other
And there's
questions
even
up
a
here?
safe harbor if you demonstrate rehabilitation, like you say.
What about where they say if the sale is over an ounce, that's an issue?
Sales.
That's a sale issue.
Sales, no.
It's not a possession issue, it's a sale issue, it's still an issue.
Illegal distribution is always a felony. If you are giving somebody any amount of marijuana for money and you're not a recreational center or a medical marijuana center or a caregiver, that's a felony.
I read the thing as a sale, an illegal sale, not an illegal sale.
I read it differently.
Doesn't it just blow your mind that we now have an offense of selling marijuana without a license? I mean, that blows my mind.
Okay, we have a question here.
Well, it's just some more information. Years ago, there was created in the City and County of Denver Drug Court. We're overwhelmed with little petty joint cases and clogging systems. So the advice that was given to just use common sense. They're going to try and offer you deals. I mean, the justice system, as long as you fight them, this will clog the system in about 2 years, and like 3 years they'll admit it, and they'll have to start doing something different. There's not enough room in the court system. They're broke, and we have to fight.
Juror nullification is a beautiful word. Everyone should learn what it means and teach everyone they know what it means, and give these guys on this panel a fighting chance of having somebody in that jury saying, I don't agree with this law, let's nullify this case.
Is there anything else you guys want to say?
Just to follow up on the juror nullification, I think that's always a good thing, but That said, as a lawyer who has tried a lot of these cases, we don't need jury nullification. We have the law. I mean, jury nullification is jurors saying, I don't agree with the law, I'm not going to apply it. We have the law on our side. We really do. And the cases that we've won, not once have I ever argued jury nullification. We don't need it.
I don't think you should argue it. I think the juror should already know it in case somebody doesn't have you for their
They should. But jurors in Colorado, they are educated and they do care. These are generally good people. They passed this 55% statewide. And so these people are smart, they're logical, and if you give them just a little bit, give them the law and give them a couple facts to grasp onto, they'll do the right thing. But the bottom line for, I think, all of the advice up here is we don't want to go to jury trial. That's not our goal in life, is to go to a jury trial and win a jury trial for marijuana. I mean, our goal in life is to avoid all of that, and it is avoidable. I mean, there is a luck factor that goes into all of this stuff. You can do everything right and get charged. You can do everything wrong and not get charged. I mean, there is a chaos factor to the justice system, and unfortunately, that's just the reality. But that said, I mean, this Amendment 64 and these bills, I mean, there are many negative aspects of these bills, many blatantly unconstitutional aspects of these bills, but there are some parts of these bills that are very positive, and there are some nuggets of, real positive reform and progress in these bills. And I just think we should read these bills, understand what they say, and we're all smart people. We're cannabinoid endowed, most of us here, and we can figure these things out, and we can figure out the loopholes, because the legislature doesn't know marijuana like we know marijuana. They don't even come close to knowing it like we know it. So there are ways that we can follow the law, but do what we want to do, and that's, I think, the goal of all of us. Do what we want to do, be free, exercise our freedom, and do it within the law. And the law gives us that ability.
Hey, any last words?
I just want to say a couple things about a few things that went right for us in this last session. And one of those is we did actually beat the DUID. It was a clean kill, as a friend of mine says, where we put our best face forward and we convinced the Judiciary Committee that that was bad policy for Colorado, and they voted it down 4-1. And so we need to remember that we have that within us for all of these other issues. They had to do an end around and do political trickery in order to beat us with this DUID. So we all need to pat ourselves on the back, because it was a group effort for everybody. Also, this other bill that came up, this drug endangered child definition, could have been a total disaster for every cannabis using parent in Colorado, because what it could have done is it would have applied to any sale, use, possession, distribution, manufacture of any Schedule I or Schedule II substance according to the Federal Controlled Substances Act. So anybody, yes, it would have said that any child that is exposed to any of this activity would have been determined to be a drug endangered child, and they could have taken your child away from you. So we have had that. The fight's not over, but that's been put on hold now for the next session, till the next session. So we've got a chance to marshal our resources. So that was another thing that went well for us. And then the third thing that hasn't been talked about tonight, that I really want to pay special kudos to Sam over here, and that is industrial hemp. I have to say that going through and going to the final hearing in front of the House Agriculture Committee for the hemp bill was probably one of the most inspiring experiences of this session for me. To see these people, these legislators singing the praises of industrial hemp, saying things like, this could really help our environment, this could save our economy, look at all the uses that we have for this. I swear, I tell people, if this had been an episode of Glee, they would have been dancing on the table, singing the praises of hemp. It was crazy, and it was absolutely beautiful. So one of these days, I want to see that for cannabis across the board for all uses. It was absolutely phenomenal. So remember, we as a community have those kinds of experiences within us. So now it's the time to educate the public, educate the legislature through the next 7 months, and get ready for the next session, because we're going to have more battles ahead of us, because there's a lot that went right, but there's a hell of a lot that needs to be fixed.
I want to say I'm honored to go to the Capitol with Terry several times a week and sit with her, and she tells me to behave and be good, and I try. But, you know, she's an excellent, eloquent representative for patients. I'm a straight up bitch. I will not take anybody fucking me over.
That's your job. I'm their boss, and I don't have to play it. You
Yes,
have to do
we
that.
do a little bit of a teamwork. And what I wanted you all to know is that there's really nothing about Terry and I, as far as our like professional qualifications, that makes us different than any of you. We love and know a lot about cannabis. Any of you could do what we do and help us, and we could have done better in this session if we had more of you there, bringing your voices in person, because honestly, after 4 years, it's the same set of faces, it's the same team. We picked up a couple good new people like Ron this year, and it's been a blessing to have him, and a couple other people, and it's been a help. But I mean, for us to be able to say, we picked up a new person this year who was really sharp. Like, we could have picked up 30 people out of this room. All of you are capable of doing this. And right now, the lobbyists run the show in this industry, and they should not, because they do not represent the best interests of this industry, and we can do a better job.
And, you know, go on Facebook and follow these ladies and find out, talk to them, find out how you can help
Yeah,
their
every event
organization.
will be posted.
I mean, literally, they write the letter for you and give you all of the emails. If you don't send it, you can't even come here anymore. You know, it's not right. We need to help each other. And,
Yeah,
you know, they're
if you
down there
bought
every
a
day.
drink tonight but didn't send an email in this session, I would like to personally bitch slap you.
And I'll let her.
I don't have a can of business, and I send emails.
Thank you.
I don't have a can of business either. I'm
More
just a
people do
patient,
not have a can of
and
business.
I'm busting
We're
my
at the
ass
Capitol.
being down there this session.
There were about 3 business owners at the Capitol, a bunch of lobbyists, and a bunch of activists. I'm probably one of the only owners, and the Hackett sisters from Botanicare up in Northwood that go to every meeting.
Yes, and I think as we go forward, we're going to have a lot of answers to, you know, creating this industry with, you know, better jobs and a better community and getting involved and kind
We
of
can
having
have this
that.
industry be the way we want it, but not if we let lobbyists make decisions for us and pay for, you can't pay instead of participating. You actually have to participate. You have to put your time and energy in.
I gave up my red card and got a lobbyist card. These are free over there. You should all go get one.
Can we ask a few more questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I have to tinkle, so make it quick.
We'll take about 5 more minutes of questions.
Oh, I just had a quick question. I was following a thread on Mr. Warren's social network page today about the potential of danger that we face by consuming cannabis in the privacy of our own home area. Like if I was having a barbecue in my backyard and smoking a joint with my friends, and my neighbor, Ray the Republican, didn't like the smell of it, he calls law enforcement. What chances do I have of being, I don't know.
Well, you're in Arvada, so there's a chance. There's always a chance.
Yeah, I'm in Arvada.
I mean, you know, we have strong constitutional rights, but law enforcement is not always your friend. There are some good cops out there. There are.
I think it's
Minority
always
of
up
them.
to that cop
But the
that-
majority of them aren't. The majority of them are drunk on power, and they had a lot of power under the drug war, and they're not just going to give that up, you know, without a fight. And they have an awesome power, which is charging you with a crime. Even if they have no evidence, even if they have nothing, they can charge you with a crime, and that is an awesome, fearsome, devastating power, even if you're innocent and you work through the court system. So just keep that in mind. But, you know, common sense. This is America, and if you're smoking a joint in your backyard, you're not being noisy and crazy, and you're just hanging out with a bunch of your friends, drinking a couple beers, grilling some burgers and smoking a joint, I have to think you're safe. And if I get that case, I mean, you're absolutely safe. Of course, I mean, but you don't want it to even get to that level. Just be smart. Get to
Smoke
know
travels
your
across
neighbors.
property
Talk
lines,
to your
but
neighbors
don't
about
smoke.
weed. Say, hey, invite them over for a joint. I mean, maybe they'll say no. but
Make sure that you heard that
at least
last
you're friendly, you know, at least you're reasonable, and get the conversation going. When we have the conversation, we win. That's how we got to Amendment 64. We had conversations, tens of thousands of conversations in our state, starting, you know, as soon as you could talk, but, you know, in the year 2000, 2001, we got medical, it's a long slog, and we're winning this war. We are right, and when we have that conversation, we win. When we actually tee up the issue, the other side wins when they suppress the conversation. The other side wins when the conversation doesn't happen. But when it does happen, I think we win because we're on the right side. I firmly believe that.
Thank you.
Rob, if you ever meet a cop like that, or you know that you're in a situation where you're about to get anything you do or say will be used against you in a court of law. I mean, I know people who pull out their video cameras, things like that. I mean, what would you suggest somebody does besides stay quiet?
I'm a huge fan of video cameras. That's a
Those
good
Russian dash cams. I
We
think
all
we
have
all
video
need
cameras.
those.
Don't we all have video cameras now?
And not just
Technology.
record your own situation. If you see someone else and the cops are fucking with them, stop and help that motherfucker. Because you would have appreciated if they did it for you.
The app we use, by the way, there's an app for both Android and iPhone called Bambuser, and it automatically loads to the cloud as it's taking the photo, so the cop can smash your camera and it's still up there safe. Either
That's
privately or
awesome.
publicly.
I would love to see an OnStar system for on head, where you can plug it in and be like, I'm getting pulled over right now. I don't know what's going to happen, but everything about your thing. If we could come up with an OnStar system for cars, cannot one of you smart techie people who knows how to use a computer come up with one for people in our situation? Just a business idea for one of you who's not as busy as I am.
Most law enforcement agencies do not use cameras. They don't have dash cams. Few do, but the reason is because they don't like cameras. They only want the jury to hear their side of the story. They don't want the jury to see the truth. So if you can videotape it, absolutely do it.
I actually have 3 questions. They should be super quick though. You guys were starting to talk about public consumption. I'm wondering if you can vaporize inside a business that is, you know, like a coffee or a tea shop, not selling marijuana or anything like that. Has there anything been written in the bill? Yeah, I know that the Clean Indoor Act has now included marijuana can be consumed inside a retail business, not marijuana retail, through vaporizer. Second question is, what is the club status, private or public, according to the bills? And the last question is the collective that has been discussed and passed in the bill pertaining to patient collective or just this Denver Post article?
I can answer a couple of those. As far as the consumption issue, it is true that marijuana in House Bill 1317, marijuana was added to the indoor smoking ban. So unfortunately, it's treated like cigarettes as far as indoor smoking of marijuana. Vaporizing is not smoking. I think we all know that, right? Vaporizing, you're not incinerating, you're not creating smoke, you create a water vapor. So as far as 1317 is concerned, vaporizing is still a go indoors in places such as this with the permission of the owner. So I think that's the first question. And then the second question is the status of clubs. And that's kind of the same answer there. You know, if it's a marijuana smoking club and if it's indoors and if it's not your home, and it's ironic that your home is still the freest place on the planet. You can smoke a cigarette in there and you can smoke a joint there and you can have 5 friends over to smoke joints in there. You can have 100 friends over to smoke joints in there. I mean, basically the legislature has shoved the smoking club idea back into residential neighborhoods where I'm sure all of our neighbors want it to be. Thank you, legislature. So we'll just have to deal with that. That's a battle we're fighting. But you know, as far as this indoor smoking club, that is the unfortunate reality. And then collectives, what the legislature did was they tried to ban this. That might have been their intent. We don't know what their intent was. They were literally doing this at the last minute. But what they ended up banning was they ended up banning the formation of an entity that is not under Article 18, Section 16, that is not constituted under Amendment 64. I mean, I don't know about you, I don't know about any of these other lawyers, but every single collective I've set up is under Amendment 64. I mean, that's kind of the point. And this is the Constitution, and it supersedes legislation that's superior to legislation. So legislation can't ban what is allowed under the Constitution. That said, the legislature tried to ban the formation of entities. Now, when you have, what is a collective? Isn't a collective 20 people or 30 people or 50 people who are friends, who know each other, who get together? Do you have to slap an LLC on that gathering? No, I don't think so. I've gotten together with my college friends for the past 25 years. We do it on a fairly scheduled basis. We hang out, we email each other. We never slapped an LLC on that, and that's happened for 20 plus years. So I think what the legislature did was stop the entities. They tried to. Actually, what they did was they stopped the formation of the entities. And by the way, 1317 is not law. This is not law yet. It's not law until the governor places his signature. Remember, some of us who grew up in the 80s, a bill is a bill, a law is a law. Well, this is a bill right now. This is not a law. The governor hasn't signed it yet. So the formation of an entity today is not prohibited. It's not against the law. You form an entity. It doesn't prohibit operating an entity. I mean, read the text of it. Read it. It says you can't form an entity. And by the way, it costs $1, literally $1 to form an LLC in Colorado if you go on the Secretary of State website. Just saying. So that is what the legislature tried to do. Now, of course, if the legislature is trying to prohibit a bunch of free Americans from getting together and conducting activities that are legal, that are allowed under the law, the legislature is going to have a hard time phrasing that in a way that passes constitutional muster and in a way that is commonsensical. And they failed here. They utterly failed to achieve whatever goal they had, and I still don't know what that goal was. So that's the, I guess, complicated answer to the third question there. What's the status of collectives? What's the status of these entities? Do they need to be entities? Do they need to have an LLC on the back of them? Can't it be a bunch of Americans getting together in a free country and doing what is legal? It seems to me like the answer is yes there, and continues to be yes, even when 1317 becomes law and the governor signs it.
Yeah, we just received word from Samantha Walsh that on May 28th at 11 a.m. in the West Foyer is when he is planning on signing that.
So we've got a little more time to do what we were planning on doing then.
Club 64 lives on.
And even after this is signed, Club 64 is completely legal. They didn't touch it. So go figure.
Good.
All right. Well, Steve.
Why do you think they're more qualified to answer that than Terry and I are?
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that none of us on this panel knows the answer to that.
The question is are the feds really going to let this go down?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts about that, though. You know, and the federal government, as we know, was utterly silent during the campaign for 64. That silence was deafening. They've been utterly silent since then. I mean, the one thing they've said is Barack Obama says, I've got bigger fish to fry. I take him at his word. The man says he's got bigger fish to fry. I do think he's got bigger fish to fry. His IRS is going after politically unpopular groups, and he's got to deal with that fallout. That's the Department of Justice. So they're dealing with that little problem there. They're not going to turn their attention to one state in the union that has opted to go this route. And they've also staked out, they have drawn the line in the sand, so to speak, at 1,000 feet from a school or a licensed daycare. That's what the feds care about. That's what they've cared about since January of 2012. I mean, we all know that's irrational. Obviously, I'm a parent. I have children. They are mobile. They walk. So 1,000 feet from a school is nothing. It's pointless. But that, for whatever reason, that's what the federal government. Yeah, it's feel good. It's political, totally arbitrary. That's all they care about. So my counsel is don't be within 1,000 feet of a school.
And every day the federal government loses a little more steam. This year we just added another medical marijuana state. We have a bunch more legislation in other states. Other states are looking at legalization. All we got to do is get to the tipping point of 25 states.
38% right now. But beyond that, what Rob brought up about the IRS thing, just as a little FYI to everyone here who's dealt with the 280E issues, Congressman Doug Lamborn today said that he would be having his office opened up to people who had been persecuted by unfair treatment to the IRS. I don't think that's just the Tea Party, so why don't you give him a call and tell him what you're going through?
That's the truth. And, you know, Jessica, how can they reach you?
This is in his district. How can people reach me? They can go to twirlinghippie.com. That's my website. You can just click on contact through there. You can call me at my office. I'm there pretty much like 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, except for when I'm out making rural deliveries in person. I make all the products that I sell by hand. I deliver them, and I hang out at the office. I mean, I don't leave the office during daylight usually. I made a special exception for you, Chloe.
Thank you for coming
You're
today.
a hard-working hippie.
Yes, she is.
All hippies are hardworking because we don't want to have a fucking job.
I also think with the what's going on with the feds, I mean, you can't believe how many hours and hours of discussion through the task force and whatever was about what are the feds going to do and how do we avoid whatever the feds are going to do. And my opinion is that I see that it's a way of slowing it down the inevitable. And I think that the federal government understands that legalization, either for medical or is inevitable. And even our illustrious governor has gone to Canada and told the media in Canada that it's inevitable, although he won't admit that here in his own state. So I see the threat of federal intervention is a way of slowing down the progress, so that other things can catch up, so they can figure out how to get around certain things. So just the threat of what are the feds going to do, I can tell you, played an enormous part in the decisions that were made about Amendment 64 and the 3 bills that have come out of that. And it's also played a part in the DUID, because there's highway money coming for states that have implemented a standard.
And don't forget, marijuana got more votes than Barack Obama in Colorado.
And the legislature's very well aware of that. They know that.
I've said it before, and I'll say this forever, because it'll never change. We got more votes than Barack Obama. That's a fact.
I think
I just have
already ashamed. They left at the diet.
Reach you to let everybody know how your organization, how they can help you. I mean, you're basically you're a medical marijuana patient. This is the lady to know.
This is the only lobbyist I will say it's okay for you to give your money to. The only one.
My name's Terry Robinette, and a lot of you know me as RX Mary Jane on Facebook. I've had that persona for over 4 years now. And I am in the process of founding an organization called the Cannabis Patients Action Network. And essentially what this is it's designed around political advocacy and also public education. I just think that we have to continue to reach out to the public. We preach to the choir and talk amongst ourselves on Facebook all the time, but we aren't the ones that really need to hear the message. It's everybody else out there in the world, including our legislators. So I am in the process of founding that. I am accepting donations, and you'll probably be hit up more straightforward on that aspect as the summer goes on. But hopefully we're going to be doing a lot of public education work in the next 7 months.
Yes, Samantha Walsh. This is one of our most amazing lobbyists on the ground floor as far as here for our community. In case you don't know Samantha Walsh.
Also a good lobbyist if you want to give money to me. Just gonna have to throw that out there. I just want to address the federal intervention question. From what we've heard, we've had several talks with the governor, several talks with people at the Department of Justice. And there's 3 things that as long as they are addressed, the indication is that there will not be any interference. And the number 1 is diversion. So if we can control the diversion to outside markets, ergo there's not this like proliferation and like in the black market of people like selling Colorado weed to Kansas, which we kind of understand there is sometimes, but you know, if Colorado is making an attempt to control diversion, that is going to impede federal or stop federal payment. Number 2 is protecting children, you know, for the pearl clutchers out there. They want to make sure that, there's no child endangerment, which again, addresses like, distance from schools. That's a local issue, actually. That was something that was originally in one of the bills. They've taken it out. It is now up to local governments to decide how far a retail cultivation processing center will be from a school. And the third thing is funding for enforcement. So they want to make sure that as long as, the regulators, the oversight, and law enforcement have enough money, they feel, to handle the marijuana issue, which I know it's a very contentious issue, but that is also one of the issues that the federal government has indicated to us that as long as those three things are addressed, they will back off. So that is the reason why they've been dragging their feet. That is the reason why they have not been creating any public statements about this. But and I think that all these bills have addressed every single one of those issues, and so I feel that, in my opinion, that we're good to go, which is going to be great. All we have to do is get through this rulemaking process. So, in my opinion, I know some people don't agree, but I actually think that while these bills aren't great, they're good. And we're just going to be back here in years to come. I mean, if you think about alcohol prohibition, when that was first done, there are still states in the union who don't let you buy alcohol on Sundays. You still can't purchase vodka in a King Soopers. So to sit there and say that like marijuana should just be a completely free market for all is sort of naive, in my opinion. And this is going to be a fight every single year. And so it's important that everybody stay involved, which I think everybody here has expressed that involvement, and I think that's really the only thing I want to say. And of course, thank you to Chloe for throwing such a dynamic event.
Can I ask a follow-up? Who was it from the DOJ that said that?
So I can say that it's sources. It's usually my person within the Department of Justice isn't, intimated to us. I know, and maybe that doesn't make people feel comfortable. I can say it has come directly from the governor's office. They've said the Department of Justice has told them if these three things are addressed, we will leave Colorado alone.
An unnamed justice official. I want a name.
She's amazing, Rob.
I'm just saying, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. I would love to hear that name of this unnamed justice official who supposedly gave the blessing to Colorado's marijuana industry.
And I think they're basically saying that if we're responsible, that, they'll let us do this. Obviously, if they had a problem with marijuana, it would have been recreational, medical, it wouldn't have made a difference. I think that, obviously saying nothing is an endorsement. For sure. Does anybody have any last words?
Go to these meetings. It's every day we got to push the ball forward. Go to the Department of Revenue meetings. Go to the regulatory meetings. It really is it's a matter of numbers and voices. So be there.
And make sure you exercise your constitutional rights.
And look nice and speak well.
Exercise your constitutional rights because they're like a muscle.
Isn't as important as being there. I mean, we got some scruffy-looking activists. They showed up a lot better than the.
Speak well, be respectful.
Well,
We want to
yes, be
educate
respectful,
them
but
for
like,
sure.
if you don't feel like you have a dry clean only clothes, fuck that. Show up anyway. You don't need that. You need to be articulate. You need to be intelligent, but you don't have to wear a tie because most of America doesn't wear a tie anymore. And I'm pretty sure all of us are sick of having those people tell us what to fucking do.
And let me tell you also, it's really important just even to be there because just our presence, even if you don't speak, just our presence at these different things tells them that we are paying attention, that this is important, and we're watching what they're doing.
The day
Not
that we
everyone is
defeated
cut
DUIs
out to testify. Not everyone is, everybody, in my opinion, everybody has a job to do. Some people, it's their job to just stay in really close contact with their representatives and get to know your state senator and your state representative, your county commissioners. Get to know those people, and that may be your job is to work with them. It's other people that can get up and testify. Not everybody has to do the same thing, but if we are all doing something and we are all doing what we can, then I know that we will prevail.
Thank you so much for everybody for coming tonight. And you can see more information on cannabisbusinessinfo.com. Sir, do you have one last thing to say? No? Okay. And thank you for coming tonight. We also did plant the first hemp crop in America this week, which is huge, you guys.
Was it in your bedroom? In your bedroom?
It wasn't in my bedroom, but sorry, you know, this is the thing.
More than that, Rob.
You know, it's so funny because the next symposium is going to be a hemp symposium. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to have a pre-panel for the DUI. We're going to try to get the head of the task force, or not the task force, the Heat Is On campaign back here and see what we can do to prevent patients here with this DUI.
Get Waller out here.
Yeah, right? That'd be nice. So anyway, drive safe and we'll see you next month. Thank you.